This video is brought to you by my patrons, Allie Beth Stuckey and Demons. If you know, you know. Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and today we're going to discuss what tradcons are looking forward to from a Trump presidency. Our point of reference is Allie Beth Stuckey's video, Trump's Day 1 Executive Order Can't Come Soon Enough, published January 6th, but I imagine most tradcons are in agreement with Allie's hopes and dreams. At the very least, her fellow AmericaFest speakers likely are, and don't worry, the AmericaFest video is coming next week. It turned out to be a larger undertaking than I expected, and I'm just going for it. No regrets. Anyway, Allie opens her first video of 2025 by explaining a bit about who she is and what she's doing. And to note, one of her goals for 2025 is to keep videos to less than an hour, which I'm on board with. And another note, she starts off by talking about Trudeau's resignation, and she speaks about Canada as though it's the US.
The stories that I'm hearing from Canada, not just that their healthcare is an absolute shambles, you just can't get the care that you need. It's just so costly. And I'm not talking about the money that it costs, although of course it does cost tax dollars, but I'm talking about the lives that it costs and the time that it takes for people to get their very serious illnesses addressed. It's just a travesty, but also housing costs and the mass migration that has changed the demographics, changed the politics there, changed the economy there has been really devastating for Canadians. It seems like the average person can't even afford to live there in a civilized way.
I would love to know what Allie thinks about the US paying the most for healthcare, but with worse outcomes. I would also like to know what she has to say about the global housing crisis and the global cost of living crisis. Because, yes, these issues are not just confined to countries with governments conservatives don't like. That does not mean I think other countries are perfect. No country is perfect. But to pretend these are just issues because of liberal governments is just daft. Of course, we can't actually contend with the real causes of these issues, like capitalism and climate change, so instead we have to focus on trans people and immigration. I wish I was kidding. And on that note, Allie would like to give thanks to those who voted for Trump, even if they're not entirely in line with conservative values.
They were necessary to winning the election, so I'm thankful for them. But that doesn't mean that we, as Christians, abandon our priorities. We also have our place at the table. And we cannot give in just because we are afraid that truly advocating for Christian values and our conservative positions on a variety of issues is going to cost us future elections. We have to be an anchor over here on the right and to pull those people who are now newly in the fold over in our direction through the power of persuasion.
This is not the first time Allie has commented about how they have to influence others over to their way of thinking. So I better not hear anything about how Allie is just giving her opinion and she's harmless. At that, even if this woman was just giving her opinion, she's not harmless. But more on that later. Let's talk about this wish list.
One of the biggest things that we are going to have to hold the line on as Christians in the Trump administration, not that we are in the Trump administration, but when it comes to the Trump administration and the policies that they will be putting forth, is abortion. You will remember during the campaign, Trump was very wishy-washy on abortion, and some of us raised a respectful ruckus and said, oh, I don't like what he's saying about Amendment 4, that he doesn't know how he's going to vote for it. Amendment 4, you'll remember in Florida where Trump has a residence, where he was voting, that would have allowed abortion through all 9 months in the state of Florida, whereas previously they had, and they do still have, because Amendment 4 didn't pass, a heartbeat bill that says, sorry, once you detect a heartbeat, you're not going to be killing this baby. And Trump originally said, oh, well, I don't know. I think heartbeat bill, that's too soon. I don't know how I'm going to vote. But a lot of people said, whoa. Really? That's your stance, President Trump? And thankfully, he backed down and he said, yeah, I'm going to vote no on Amendment 4. That goes to show the Christians do have influence in his administration, had influence over his campaign. And of course, that wouldn't have been the case with Kamala Harris. So even though Trump isn't as pro-life as I am, as I would like him to be, I know where pro-lifers can have influence. And it wasn't going to be in a Kamala Harris presidency, the most pro-abortion candidate we had ever had.
This doesn't surprise me, and I would like to point out that I wasn't the one who brought up abortion. This does harken back to a previous video though, where I noted that folks like Lila Rose weren't happy Trump wasn't as pro-birth as they were, but they voted for him over Harris because they knew they would get further with him than with her. Though honestly, I don't think voting for someone else was ever a real consideration. It's also worth pointing out that Amendment 4 in Florida received 57% of yes votes, which in any other world would mean a majority do want a constitutional right to abortion, but not in Florida, which is one of 4 states that decided a majority means 60%. They might talk about giving rights back to the states, let the people decide, but they will still do whatever it takes to make it difficult for the people to have their voices heard.
One of the most imminent changes, one of the most important, and one of the quickest changes that we are going to see is on the trans issue. Trump is with us on that, at least when it comes to women's sports. Now, of course, he's going to be pals with people like Caitlyn/Bruce Jenner. I don't know that he's going to go so far as to say it's always wrong, but he's with us when it comes to children. And of course, that is what we are most concerned about because children are always the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments.
Quote, as policymakers around the world debate whether minors should have access to transition-related medications, a study published Monday in the nation's premier pediatric medical journal found that the drugs are rarely prescribed to youths. Less than 0.1% of adolescents with private insurance in the United States are transgender or gender diverse and are prescribed puberty blockers or gender-affirming hormones, according to the findings published in JAMA Pediatrics. The research note, which analyzed the private insurance claims for more than 5.1 million young patients ages 8 to 17 from 2018 to 2022, also found that no transgender patients under 12 were prescribed gender-affirming hormones. End quote. You know, Allie likes to call a lot of things demonic.
No, saying that anyone can change genders or change sexes is assenting to a demonic lie.
You know what I think is demonic? Lying. And for anyone who says this is just about the kids,
I am not someone who is like, oh yeah, adults can do what they want to do, but let's just focus on the kids. Sure, adults can do what they want to do. Should they do what they want to do always? No. And should we change society in any way to accommodate the absolute dangerous, both personally and to others, both individually and societally? This delusion that you can change your gender or you can declare your gender to be something that is separate from your sex. No, I'm not going to go along with that in any way. I will not use pronouns that do not correspond with your biological reality because I will not participate in a lie. And sometimes that is the only thing that we can do to make a difference.
Wow, Allie, you're so brave. Refusing to use pronouns so you can make a difference. Please. If Allie saw Buck Angel or Blair White, she would say he and she respectively, because as it turns out, you can indeed change your gender at will. Gender is not embedded in your DNA. It is how you present yourself to the outside world, and at that, what is considered masculine and feminine changes over time and means different things in different cultures. But the point of all this is that it's not about kids. If it was, they wouldn't have had Matt Gaetz speak at AmFest for one. It's about forcing people to conform to their beliefs. Speaking of.
Now, I don't think there's going to be any change to the legal definition of marriage in the United States. That doesn't mean that you and I need to compromise on it, though. Trans women are women is the same nonsense math as love is love. And again, it goes back to Genesis 1:27. And if you can't be convinced of Genesis 1:27, I don't think that you're going to be convinced of the rest of it either.
I hope no one thought tradcons had forgotten about gay marriage. I think it's lower on their list of priorities right now. Allie didn't speak at length about it like she did everything else, but it's still there. Take nothing for granted, nothing is guaranteed, even a right you thought you'd already won. And now, the number one priority, I don't even think I'm exaggerating, most of the AmFest speeches were Jesus and...
When it comes to immigration, most people are with us. At least when it comes to the top priority, which is deporting as fast as possible the most violent criminals and securing the border so they can't come back in. And the punishment needs to be brutal. If we are talking about people who have no right to be here and they are committing additional crimes in addition to being here illegally, the punishment needs to be brutal. and they need to be deported immediately.
Weirdly, Allie seems to liken most violent with terrorists, but in reality, domestic terrorism is a greater threat in the United States. At least she does mention visa overstays, which for some reason most seem to ignore when talking about securing the border. She says it in conjunction with how there should be no illegal immigration, and I don't think any country has ever achieved that. She apparently envisions this as people being so disincentivized that they're unwilling to make that dangerous trek. But what about the people who overstay their visas? They're not making a dangerous trek, they're just not leaving when they're supposed to. Or is Allie not as worried about them for some reason? For anyone wondering where Allie falls in the MAGA civil war, she is not in favor of the H-1B visa, and she would also like a cap on legal immigration. She calls London Londonistan, and I would love for her to tell us how conservative Muslims, not extremist Muslims, conservative Muslims, differ from conservative Christians such as herself. That was mostly it for the wish list though. Earlier she did toss in a mention of inflation and involvement in unnecessary wars, so I suppose we can add that to the list as well. Oh, and gut and rebuild our security apparatus and change our healthcare system. As for my own thoughts, I don't know what Trump will do about abortion, but I do think life for trans people, and I was going to say immigrants, but really anyone who isn't white, is going to be very difficult. Because despite all the talk about save the children, they don't want there to be trans adults either, and Allie's sure, adults can do what they want, but should they? Is very similar to Project 2025's declaration that we have the freedom to do what we ought, not what we want. And though most conversations about immigration are about illegal immigration, I'm pretty sure these folks see the US as a white country and thus assume anyone who isn't white is an immigrant. And though the focus tends to be on illegal immigration, I'm seeing immigration in general slip in more and more. And as for inflation, I don't expect prices to lower or for my income to go up during Trump's presidency. And I'm not sure about war. He does seem a bit eager for one, but I think that depends on those around him. As for gut and rebuild our security apparatus, oh, I do think those will look quite different. And changing our healthcare system, I'm not really sure what they're talking about. My mind goes to the ACA, but I think they mean things like getting dyes out of foods and not requiring vaccines. I would be surprised if they tried to repeal the ACA again, but I think their idea of fixing healthcare is deregulating as much as possible, which I don't think will make people healthier. Moving on, Allie does discuss polls of Trump voters, I guess to prove these things are what the voters want, and it goes as expected up until this point.
75% of Trump supporters, according to Pew Research, did not think the legacy of slavery affects the position of Black people in American society today, much or at all.
56% of white voters supported Trump, 16% of Black voters. This means that Trump had more white than Black voters, and so a bunch of white people are telling us that they don't think Black people have been affected by slavery much or at all? That is stupid and embarrassing. Though so quick to claim that MAGA are the real Americans, they know shamefully little about the country they claim to love so much. Or perhaps they do know, but choose to ignore because it doesn't fit with the narrative they tell themselves. And you know, having an opinion doesn't mean it's fact. Of course, this is Allie Beth Stuckey.
And that really needs to be higher than that. 2020 really did a number on people in a good way and a bad way. I mean, a lot of people just got really confused in 2020 because of all of the social justice nonsense, but it was also clarifying for a lot of people who were previously confused. The vast majority of people, it seems, from the conversations I have, started listening to this show in 2020. There just weren't that many Christians in the evangelical space saying, yeah, I'm not going to post a black square. And actually, riots are not the voice of the unheard. And actually, I'm not sure about some of these claims about systemic racism and pervasive white supremacy and white privilege. I'm not so sure that social justice is justice according to the God of the Bible. I don't think this is going to end up well. And those of us saying those things received a lot of flack, like more than ever. Just the hateful, angry messages that I received from professing Christians during that time.
Wow. It's rare that I'm speechless, but just wow. People can have whatever opinion they want. That doesn't make it a fact. Just because it aligns with their worldview doesn't make it true. Just because it doesn't require them to do anything, doesn't require them to think, doesn't mean it's right. And if you don't care, okay. I think that's wrong. I think people should care about reality, about other people. But if you don't, well, that's your business. But this desire to try and convince other people that caring about others is wrong, history is wrong, I don't get it. I mean, this is the woman who wrote Toxic Empathy, so I shouldn't expect anything else, but what is this? Allie did say the answer to "you're racist" isn't "I'm not," it's "I don't care," but just every time I'm so surprised to find that people can't even meet the lowest expectations. And so often, those same people call themselves Christians. And then I see the comments, is it just that folks like Allie discourage thinking and just spoon feed people how they should think and be? And so when someone else comes along saying, actually, did you know, they feel overwhelmed by the idea that reality is more complicated than just good and evil and react defensively or dismissively? Actually, I think that might be it. People who don't agree with them threaten their worldview, so they need to ensure everyone falls in line or make up a reason as to why people who don't agree are wrong. Over the holidays, my mother told me that only people in the country are free thinkers, people in the city all think the same, and it was such a moment. And if you're thinking, Kit, didn't you live in Seattle? Isn't that a city? Yes, and I've lived in other cities as well. And I'm just gobsmacked by the idea that millions of people from different backgrounds who have lived in other places all just think the same, while people who have lived in a small town all their life and treat outsiders with hostility are free thinkers. What? Anyway, sorry about the tangent. One last thing from Allie.
All left-wing collectivist movements, it lends itself to destruction and confusion and chaos because they are all satanic and Satan is the author of chaos and confusion.
Allie does not like that I am on a chair. Anyway, for anyone wondering what left-wing collectivist movements she's talking about, she's referring to critical race theory and social justice ideology. I wasn't kidding when I said Allie likes to call things demonic. So do the people at AmFest. That strikes me as a thought-stopping technique. When someone doesn't agree with you, well, they're demonic. No further thoughts required. They can be dismissed as an agent of Satan who just wants to get between you and God. Allie is so amazingly hateful, but she sounds so sweet. And that was it for this video. Please feel free to leave your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.